Avalanche is a mutant named Dominikos Petrakis, a character who was created in 1981 and stuck around in Marvel's comics until 2012 when he was killed off. Created by Claremont and Byrne, he's a character who has been a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, the X-Corps, the Freedom Force, and Villains for Hire. Sorry, I always up John's name, you guys. But what exactly are his powers? Well, that's what we're breaking down today with our list of the top 10 superpowers you didn't know Avalanche had. Starting us off in at number 10, Seismic Kinesis. First and foremost, let's discuss the baseline of what Avalanche's powers are. He is a mutant capable of Seismic Kinesis, the ability to generate seismic waves. These waves, or vibrations rather, emit from his hands, and can create highly destructive effects within not only the ground, but also the air and in water as well. It affects non-living organic objects, not to be confused by organic tissue, more on that later, but can also damage inorganic objects, causing them to crumble, shatter, etc. It creates earthquake-like disasters. So yeah, he could f up a building if he wanted to. Moving on to number 9, Hand-to-Hand Combat. Generally, this is a given for most superheroes. They know how to handle themselves when it comes to hand-to-hand combat and have likely spent a whole lot of time in training honing those skills. But Avalanche's training comes from a unique place. He was initially a skilled and experienced Greco-Roman wrestler. Greek heritage. In addition to that, he received a whole lot of training in unarmed combat while he was at Freedom Force. Moving on to our number 8 spot, let's talk about his weaknesses. Alright, yes, this is a list about Avalanche's powers, but let's be frank here, friends. There isn't enough hidden powers of Avalanche's to fill a top 10 list. So let's talk about the flip side of that, something that is honestly equally as fascinating, his weakness. Avalanche's abilities have no effect on organic tissue. Now, we've seen samples of this when Avalanche has used his powers on the likes of the Hulk, who was left uninjured, causing the resulting feedback to shatter the bones inside of Avalanche's arms. Haha. Speaking of though, in at number 7, Accelerated Healing. Now to be honest, our last number kind of covered that, didn't it? Avalanche has an accelerated healing factor to an extent. Not to the extent of a character like Wolverine, but more so than the average human. He was able to heal the shattered bones in his arms over time, and this is particularly useful considering that his vibrations won't affect organic tissue. And when he uses those vibrations, and they fail to affect said tissue, this causes feedback, which can harm him. But he's got other precautions in place aside from, healing real good. Which brings us to our next number, in at 6, his equipment. Not all mutants are as well-rounded as Wolverine. Let's just say that. Avalanche is the perfect example of that. Because of the feedback that his powers can cause, he wears body armor. Supplement that healing factor. A battle suit that comes with a helmet that gives him enhanced resistance to injury to the extent that it has prevented him from being harmed by a landmine. Handy. He also has access to team-specific equipment when he was on the X-Corps and the Freedom Force, with the latter's helicopter that he'd use for transportation. Speaking of, in at number 5, he's a wave walker. The Freedom Force helicopter wasn't Avalanche's only form of transportation though. He was able to use his powers to create waves in the ground that he could ride on, lifting up earth matter that he just rides atop of. He referred to these as ground tidal waves. Essentially, he'd generate a seismic wave and then ride along it. It's not the best mode of transportation though, as you can imagine. Think about all the property damages he'd get slammed with if he used that all the time to get around. Yikes. And at number 4, tsunamis. We mentioned briefly earlier on our list that Avalanche's Seismic Kinesis could be used to not only affect the earth and ground, but also the air and water. Let's take a look at the latter there. Water. Avalanche has been capable of using his seismic waves on water to create tidal waves, real ones this time, not ground ones. He can affect very large bodies of water and therefore has been assumed capable of creating a tsunami if he's so pleased. That being said, his powers have been proven to be more effective on the ground rather than in water. Kinda makes sense. Moving on to number 3, he's finely tuned. When it comes to Avalanche's seismic wave generation, we've been talking a lot about how destructive it can be. But it is not an out-of-control wave of demolition on Avalanche's part by any means. He actually has fine-tuned his control over this power so that he can do feats like move large objects without damaging them. He's done this with tanker trucks, using his waves to lift them up and then toss them at foes in battle. He has enough precision that he can use his ability to throw his foes off balance by weakening the structural integrity of a building or the ground itself. And at number 2, Selective Invulnerability. Avalanche depicts an invulnerability to the effects of his own vibrations. Generating them within his vicinity does not affect him. He could stand in the midst of an earthquake he was creating and remain unharmed. But it is not perfect invulnerability, because if his vibrations were somehow turned around or redirected at him by another source, he himself would be injured by them. And finally, in at number 1, he can direct vibrations. Avalanche can direct his vibrations. What that means is that the mutant doesn't need to physically touch an object or an area to affect it. He can direct his vibrations to move against said object or area from a distance. He also has some precision with this, being able to direct them against large structures or objects like buildings, or across large chunks of the earth itself, which can create earthquakes or avalanches within specific limited areas of his choosing. So if he's like, I just want to cause an earthquake in this one section, bam, he can do it. With enough concentration, he could direct his powers to Earth's tectonic plates, which could potentially cause major large-scale damage. Yeah, but luckily he's dead, so. Alright, there we have it, friends. Are you a fan of Avalanche? Do you think he'll ever come back in the comics? Resurrection, death is not a real thing in comic books. Give us a shout in those comments below and let us know your thoughts and feels. If you guys dug this video, let us know. Drop us a comment. And be sure to hit that like button. Also, share it with a friend. And subscribe to Top to Nerd if you haven't already. We'd love it if you stuck around with us some more. In the meantime, thank you for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video. I wrote an intro for this, right? Please, for the love of— yes, I did! Yes! In addition to that, he received a whole lot of training in unarmed, and gives him enhanced resistance to energy, which could— last sentence. I'm gonna have a sip of coffee.